I never liked being home alone at night, but at 18 my parents figured I was old enough. And I couldn't really argue with them. I mean, I was an adult, right? Old enough to stay in the house without being scared of every creak and groan. At least that's what I told myself when my parents left for their weekend trip. They'd been planning it for weeks. A long overdue getaway, just the two of them. "You'll be fine, Emily," Mom said as she hugged me goodbye. "Just keep the doors locked and don't stay up too late." I laughed, rolling my eyes. "I think I can handle myself." Dad ruffled my hair like I was still a little kid. "And don't forget to let Max out before bed." Max, my big German shepherd, was already standing by the door, his tail wagging. He was my protector, my shadow. He made being home alone a little less terrifying. I watched their car disappear down the driveway, the sun setting behind them. The moment they were gone, the house felt different, quieter. I shook off the creeping unease and locked the door, triple-checking it before heading to the kitchen. Max followed, his claws clicking on the tile floor. "Well, buddy, looks like it's just you and me." He huffed in response, plopping down near my feet while I rummaged through the fridge. The night passed uneventfully at first. I made popcorn, curled up on the couch and put on a movie. Max dozed beside me, occasionally lifting his head when a loud sound came from the TV. Everything felt normal. Safe. Until I got the news alert. It was just past midnight. My phone vibrated on the coffee table. At first I ignored it, thinking it was some random spam notification, but then Max's ears perked up, his body tensing. I grabbed my phone, squinting at the bright screen. Breaking news. Convicted murderer escapes from local prison. I sat up straighter. My stomach twisted as I read the article. Authorities have issued an urgent warning following the escape of John Reynolds, a convicted serial killer who was serving a life sentence. He was last seen near Route 15. Residents are advised to stay indoors and report any suspicious activity ***. Route 15. That was barely 20 miles from here. I glanced at Max, his ears standing straight. He was staring at the front door, completely still. "It's fine," I muttered, more to myself than to him. "The guy's probably long gone by now." Max didn't move. He stayed alert, eyes locked on the door. A sudden chill ran through me. I grabbed the remote and turned off the TV, leaving the house in eerie silence. I stood up slowly, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. I forced myself to walk to the front door just to check, just to be sure. Locked. Deadbolt secured. Chain in place. I let out a breath, feeling stupid for being so paranoid. But then Max growled. A warning. I froze. His gaze never left the front door, but the hairs along his back were raised. My pulse pounded in my ears. I moved cautiously to the window, peeking out through the blinds. Nothing. Just the empty driveway, the quiet street, the trees swaying in the wind. "You're freaking me out, buddy," I whispered, backing away. The clock on the wall read 12:30 a.m. I decided to go to bed. Staying up late with a news story like that wasn't doing me any favors. I headed upstairs, Max following close behind. My bedroom door creaked as I pushed it open and I flipped on the light, bathing the room in a soft glow. Everything was normal. My bed, my desk, my pile of clothes in the corner. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I locked my bedroom door out of habit. Max circled a few times before settling near the bed. I changed into my pajamas, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. Lying in bed, I pulled the blankets up to my chin. The house was silent except for the occasional shift of Max's breathing. Then, just as I started drifting off, a noise. I snapped awake, heart hammering. It was soft. Barely there. A creak. Buffle. Coming from downstairs. I held my breath, listening. Silence. Maybe I imagined it. I turned over, squeezing my eyes shut. Then, creak. Max growled, deep and guttural. I sat up so fast my head spun. The sound was coming from the hallway. Someone was in the house. Every muscle in my body locked in place. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I unlocked it. 9-1. A loud thump. I choked back a scream, dropping the phone. Max was on his feet, ears alert, his growl intensifying. Someone was outside my door. I heard the floorboards shift under their weight. Slow, deliberate movements. I couldn't breathe. My first instinct was to hide, but there was nowhere to go. My only exit was the window, but jumping from the second floor wasn't an option. I grabbed Max's collar, trying to keep him quiet. He was rigid beneath my grip, his body tense. The doorknob rattled. I bit down on my lip to keep from screaming. Then, silence. No footsteps. No movement. Nothing. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Finally, I heard something. A soft, wet sound. Wicking. A shudder ran through me. Max was still. His growling had stopped. I hesitated, then slowly, cautiously reached out a hand toward the edge of the bed. A warm, wet tongue licked my fingers. I exhaled, relief washing over me. "Max," I whispered, barely able to hear myself. He licked my hand again. I closed my eyes. Maybe I really had imagined it. Maybe the sound was just the house settling. Maybe. The closet door creaked. My blood ran cold. Max was still on the floor. I could feel his fur against my leg. Then, who had licked my hand? My breath caught in my throat. The closet door was open just a crack. A shadow loomed behind it. My entire body screamed for me to move, to run, to do something, but I couldn't. I stayed frozen in place, my hands still hanging over the bed. The silence was deafening. Then, just as I found the courage to move, the door swung open. I didn't even have time to scream before the lights flickered, and everything went black. I have always been fascinated by antique mirrors. Something about them calls to me. Their intricate frames, the way they capture light, how they seem to hold on to whispers of the past. So when I found an old ornate mirror at a dusty little thrift shop on the outskirts of town, I knew I had to have it. The glass was smooth, untouched by time, and the frame, a deep, curling gold, looked almost too perfect. The shopkeeper, an old woman with cloudy eyes and paper-thin hands, hesitated as I pulled out my wallet. "Are you sure you want this one?" she asked in a tone that made my stomach twist. I laughed, trying to shake off the unease that settled in my bones. Why wouldn't I? It's beautiful. Her milky eyes lingered on the mirror for a long moment before she sighed. "Be careful what you let in." I didn't ask what she meant. I should have. That night, I hung the mirror in my bedroom directly across from my bed. A strange choice maybe, but I liked the way it opened up the room. As I settled in for the night, I glanced at my reflection one last time. My own tired eyes stared back at me. Nothing unusual. The first few nights, I barely noticed anything strange. At least nothing I could be sure of. I'd walk past the mirror and feel something off. A flicker of movement when I hadn't moved. A shadow in the glass that didn't belong to me. But every time I looked directly at it, the mirror was normal. Then things got worse. One night, as I sat at my vanity brushing my hair, I glanced at the mirror and froze. My reflection was smiling. But I wasn't. A slow, deliberate, unnatural smile stretched across its lips, teeth too white, too sharp. My breath hitched. My fingers trembled as I reached up to touch my own face, my real face. The reflection didn't mimic me. It just kept smiling. My body turned to ice. This was wrong. Mirrors weren't supposed to behave this way. Then the reflection whispered, "I see you." I screamed, stumbling backwards so hard that I knocked over my chair. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stared at the mirror. My reflection was back to normal. Wide-eyed. Terrified. But normal. I barely slept that night, and when I did, nightmares consumed me. Faces in the glass. Hands reaching. Whispers in the dark. I told myself I had imagined it. Maybe I had been too tired, my mind playing tricks on me. I had to believe that or I would go mad. The next night, the whispers returned. Every time I passed the mirror, I heard them, soft, distant, like voices calling from another world. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they sobbed, and sometimes they said my name. I started avoiding the mirror, dressing in the hallway, turning my back when I walked past. But the thing inside it wanted my attention. One night, I woke up to a suffocating weight on my chest. My room was dark, the air thick, wrong. My breath came in short gasps as my body refused to move. Sleep paralysis, I told myself. Just sleep paralysis. Then I saw it. Standing at the foot of my bed was my reflection. At first I thought I was still dreaming. The room was shrouded in shadows, but the figure in front of me was unmistakable. It was me, but not me. Its skin was pale, almost gray, its eyes sunken and hollow. It was smiling again. The same stretched, unnatural grin. I tried to scream, but my throat was locked. My body was frozen. The thing knelt beside my bed, its face inches from mine. "You let me in," it whispered, its voice dripping with malice. A tear slipped down my cheek as I tried desperately to wake up. But I wasn't sleeping. Its ice-cold fingers grazed my arm, sending a sharp pain through my body. My vision blurred, the room tilting, darkening, swallowing me whole. Then I woke up. Sunlight streamed through my window. I gasped for air, my heart pounding against my ribs. The nightmare was over. Except it wasn't. I sat up, trying to shake the fear from my bones. But something felt different. Slowly I turned toward the mirror. My reflection stood there, motionless. Then it grinned. And I realized I was no longer the one outside the glass. I pounded on the inside of the mirror, screaming, but my room remained silent. My reflection, the thing wearing my face, tilted its head, watching me with amusement. Then, without breaking eye contact, it walked away. I was trapped. Days passed, though I couldn't tell how many. The mirror world had no time, only shadows stretching endlessly into nothing. I didn't need to eat, didn't need to sleep. I only existed, screaming in silence, watching the thing in my body live my life. I saw everything. It wore my face, spoke in my voice, laughed with my friends. But it wasn't me. It was something else. And worst of all, no one noticed. Not my best friend. Not my mother. Not even my cat. The thing pretending to be me was perfect. It was charming, confident. Better than I had ever been. I watched, helpless, as it thrived in my skin. But I knew the truth. It wasn't me. And then one night it looked directly into the mirror. Directly at me. I had spent days, maybe weeks, screaming, clawing at the glass, trying to break free. But this was the first time it acknowledged me. It smiled. And then it whispered the words that shattered my last shred of hope. "You let me in, and now you'll never get out." I woke up to the sound of scratching. It was faint, almost like a whisper against the silence, but distinct enough to pull me from my uneasy sleep. My heart pounded as I turned over, my eyes scanning the darkness of my bedroom. The red glow of my alarm clock read 2:47 a.m. Max was curled up at the foot of my bed, his breathing slow and steady. His ears twitched, but he didn't seem disturbed by the sound. For a moment I convinced myself I had imagined it. Maybe the house settling or the wind outside. But then I heard it again. A slow, deliberate scrape, like fingernails dragging against wood. A chill ran through me as I sat up. My pulse thundered in my ears as I reached for my phone. The screen's dim glow cast eerie shadows around the room, but nothing seemed out of place. I swallowed hard. "It's nothing. Just go back to sleep, ***. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, my breath shaky. The house was old, it made noises. That's all it was. That's all it had to be. But deep inside something felt off. The next morning, I woke up groggy, my body heavy from a restless night. Sunlight streamed through my blinds, giving my room a false sense of warmth. I rubbed my eyes and stretched before swinging my legs over the bed. Max lifted his head, yawning, and wagged his tail lazily. "Morning, boy." My voice was hoarse. As I stood up, my foot hit something. A low thunk echoed under my bed. I frowned. Kneeling down, I lifted the bed skirt and peered underneath. Nothing but a few stray socks and an old book I'd forgotten about. But why did it feel like something was down there? Brushing off the thought, I grabbed my phone and checked my messages. Nothing from my parents yet. I sent them a quick good morning text and went about my day. Still, something nagged at me. Strange occurrences. The rest of the day was off. I noticed small things. The kitchen window, which I was certain I had closed, was open just a crack. The fridge door wasn't shut all the way, even though I was meticulous about keeping it closed. And then there was Max. He kept acting strange, whining at corners, standing at the top of the stairs with his ears pinned back, staring at something I couldn't see. By the time night fell, my unease had settled deep in my bones. I locked the doors twice, checked the windows 3 times. Max seemed restless, pacing back and forth before finally settling at the foot of my bed. I tried to sleep, and The scratching came back. 2:50 am. I was awake this time, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it. Scratch, 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 asterisk, asterisk. I squeezed my eyes shut. It's nothing. Ignore it, asterisk, asterisk. But then, a long slow creak. The sound of my closet door moving. My body stiffened. My breath hitched in my throat. No, no, no. I turned my head slowly, my pulse hammering. The closet door was open. Just an inch. I stared at it, my skin crawling. Had I left it open? I couldn't remember. I never left my closet open. My hands gripped the blanket, my entire body frozen. Max lifted his head, ears pricked, but he didn't growl this time. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking as I turned on the flashlight. A weak beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the inside of my closet. Nothing. Just my clothes, my shoes, the usual clutter. Then why did it feel like something was in there? Watching me. Asterisk, asterisk. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. I exhaled shakily and pulled the covers up to my chin. I didn't dare get up to close the door. I didn't want to move at all. I forced my eyes shut and tried to convince myself it was all in my head. The next day, I woke up late, my body sore from sleeping so stiffly. My phone was still in my hand. Max was already up, standing by my bedroom door, staring intently at something outside. His ears twitched when I sat up, but he didn't move. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. My closet door was wide open. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Did I sleepwalk? Did I open it in my sleep? Asterisk, asterisk. I stood up, forcing myself to be rational. There's an explanation. There has to be, asterisk, asterisk. But deep inside, a horrible thought lingered. What if I didn't open it? What if someone else did? Asterisk, asterisk. I needed to get out of the house. A moment of relief. I decided to go to a cafe just to be around people. The fresh air helped, but my nerves were still on edge. I texted my mom asking when they'd be back, but she only replied, "Still another 2 days, sweetie. Everything okay?" I hesitated before responding. "Yeah, just a little bored." I didn't want to worry them. When I got back home that evening, I tried to shake off my fear. I turned on all the lights, blasted music while I made dinner, and even let Max sit at my feet while I ate. For a while things felt normal, until I found the note. The note. I was heading up to my room when I saw it. A small, crumpled piece of paper on the bottom step of the staircase. Frowning, I picked it up. My blood turned to ice as I unfolded it. It was written in red ink. "You taste different when you're scared." My breath hitched. My hands trembled. I ran. I slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it. My chest heaved as I tried to rationalize, tried to make sense of it. Had someone broken in? Was this a sick joke? Max whimpered beside me, sensing my fear. I clutched my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen, debating whether to call someone. Oh, the police? And tell them what? Asterisk, asterisk. I could already hear their response. Asterisk, are you sure you didn't write it yourself? Are you sure it's not a prank? Asterisk. I felt sick. I wasn't crazy. I knew that much, asterisk, asterisk. Someone had been in my house. And worse, they were still here. The night of terror. I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked sinister. Max paced restlessly, letting out low, anxious whimpers. He refused to go near the bed. That terrified me more than anything. At some point, exhaustion won. My eyes closed, my body giving in to sleep. And then, a long wet lick against my hand. My eyes fluttered open. The room was pitch dark. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. My breath came in slow, shallow gasps. I reached out, patting the space beside me. Max. I felt fur. I exhaled shakily. It's just Max. It's fine, asterisk, asterisk. I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, the sun was barely rising when I opened my eyes. I turned over and instinctively reached for Max. But he wasn't there. Confused, I sat up and looked around. He wasn't in the room. A sick feeling crept over me. If Max wasn't in bed with me last night, then what had licked my hand? A chill ran down my spine. My stomach twisted into knots. And then I heard it. A soft scratching sound, coming from under the bed. I lay still in bed, paralyzed by the creeping dread that washed over me. The scratching sound, faint but persistent, came from under the bed, its rhythmic scrape like a whisper of something trying to claw its way out. My heart raced as I tried to process what had just happened. Max, my loyal protective dog, was missing. He wasn't anywhere in the room, not curled up in his usual spot at the foot of the bed, not lying beside me like he often did when I was restless. But the most disturbing part of it all wasn't the absence of Max. It was the unmistakable feeling that something was wrong, something was off in a way I couldn't quite articulate. The scratching continued, louder now, the noise echoing in the silence of my room. It wasn't a rodent. It wasn't the house settling. It was deliberate, intentional. I had to get up. I had to see what was under the bed. My hand shook as I reached for the edge of the mattress, slowly pushing myself into a sitting position. The darkness was thick, oppressive, and my breath was shallow, each inhale making my chest ache. The scratching stopped, and in the sudden silence, the feeling of being watched crept over me like a suffocating fog. I couldn't shake the sensation that something was right there, just beyond my vision, lurking in the shadows. I grabbed my phone from the bedside table, the screen still lit up from the earlier text messages. The flashlight on my phone felt weak, the beam feeble in comparison to the vast black expanse of my bedroom. But it was all I had. With a breath that felt too loud in my ears, I swung my legs off the side of the bed. My feet hit the cold floor, the chill seeping into my bones. Every step I took toward the bed felt like a step toward something worse, a place I didn't want to go. But I had to. I crouched down, my flashlight shaking as I lifted the bed skirt, my eyes scanning the dark space beneath. The usual clutter was there, dust bunnies, old shoes, forgotten knickknacks. But there, in the farthest corner of the room, was something else. A shadow, a shape, a figure. I gasped, stumbling backward, my heart hammering in my chest. It was Max. But it wasn't Max. The dog's body was twisted unnaturally, his limbs bent at odd angles, his fur matted and stained. His eyes were wide open, but there was no life behind them. They were dark and glassy, empty. I felt bile rise in my throat, and I had to swallow hard to keep from throwing up. My stomach twisted in agony, but I couldn't look away. Something was wrong, so wrong. Max's body was still cold. Yet there was a faint movement. His lips were curling up into a smile. A twisted, sick smile that didn't belong to him. Suddenly I heard it again, whispering. Not from Max, but from somewhere behind me, from the very air around me. It was a voice, low and guttural. You should have left. I froze, my blood running cold. The voice was familiar, but it wasn't Max's. It wasn't mine either. It was the thing in the mirror. The thing that had worn my face. I didn't dare turn around, not fully. But I could feel its presence. I could feel the weight of its gaze on me, cold and suffocating, pressing against me like an invisible force. It was here in my room, in my world. You've been too curious, the voice whispered again, the words dripping with malice. You should have never let me in. I couldn't move. My legs were like lead, my body frozen in place. I was trapped. In my own home. In my own life. The scratching returned. This time it was inside my head, sharp, unbearable, relentless. It was like nails on a chalkboard, only worse. It burrowed into my mind, making my vision blur, my thoughts scatter. I turned just slightly, my eyes flicking to the side. And there it was, the thing standing in the doorway of my bedroom, watching me with my face. My twisted, empty reflection, its eyes cold and unblinking. It wasn't wearing my skin, it was me. But not. It smiled, the smile stretched wide, too wide, and its eyes gleamed with something far darker than I could ever comprehend. You let me in, it whispered again, its voice a mockery of my own. I shook my head violently, trying to fight the overwhelming wave of panic that threatened to consume me. I had to get away. I had to escape. But when I tried to move, my body betrayed me. My legs refused to cooperate. My arms felt heavy. I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry, as if the air itself had thickened, suffocating me. The thing in the doorway tilted its head, watching me like a predator sizing up its prey. Its grin widened and it stepped forward, its feet silent on the floor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The walls of the room closed in, and the very air seemed to constrict, pressing against me, forcing me to stay in that nightmare, unable to break free. You belong to me now, it whispered, its voice a dark promise. The words echoed in my mind, reverberating through the silence of the room. The thing was right. I had let it in. I had invited it into my life, into my home, and now it had taken root. There was no escaping it. My reflection in the mirror was no longer just a reflection. It was real, it was here, and it would never leave. The thing in the doorway stepped closer. Its breath was cold against my skin as it reached out, its fingers trailing along my arm, sending a jolt of ice through my veins. "You'll never get out," it whispered. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't run. There was nothing left to do but surrender. And as I did, the last thing I saw before everything went black was the thing's twisted smile, watching me with cold, dead eyes. And then there was nothing. I woke up with a start, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. I was back in my bed, back in my room. The early morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft rays on the floor. For a moment, I thought it was a dream. But then I saw the closet door, wide open, and the scratching sound, faint but there. Somewhere in the dark corners of my mind, I knew. I had never really escaped. It was still here, and it always would be. The thing in the mirror was waiting. The unease in my stomach was growing by the day. Every time I walked through the house, my eyes darted around nervously like I was being watched. But I couldn't make sense of it. Maybe it was just paranoia. I mean, I was home alone and my parents had been gone for a while. Max was here with me, but even his behavior wasn't offering any comfort. He had become oddly agitated, barking at seemingly nothing, growling at corners where no one stood. I tried to tell myself it was just stress from being away from home. It had to be. There were small things though. Minor occurrences that made my skin crawl. Doors I was sure I had closed were slightly ajar when I passed by. I'd come home to find food missing from the fridge or items displaced on shelves. It was as though someone had been in my house, moving things around when I wasn't looking. But I brushed it all off. It didn't help that Max seemed to be taking it all harder than I was. He had always been a calm dog, but lately his nerves were stretched thin. He barked and growled at the walls, pacing the rooms with a nervous energy I couldn't explain. I chalked it up to stress. He's just missing my parents, I reasoned. He's fine. But deep down, a part of me wasn't so sure. The horror unfolds slowly. One night things took a turn. It was after dark and I was heading to bed when I noticed Max sitting at the door, staring outside, his ears flat against his head. His tail was stiff and his eyes were wide with fear. "Max?" I called gently, but he didn't respond. He didn't even acknowledge me. Confused, I opened the door and called him again, but he didn't move. It was as if he was frozen, locked in place by something unseen. I stepped forward, but the closer I got, the more he backed away. "What's going on, Max?" My voice trembled, though I tried to hide it. Max didn't act like this. Never. Finally, he stood up, his body rigid, and he growled low in his throat, like he was warning me of something. Something I couldn't see. I couldn't explain it. I called to him one more time, but he refused to come inside. That night, I slept fitfully, the eerie silence broken only by the occasional bark from Max outside, but I didn't dare investigate further. I told myself he'd be fine. He was just a dog after all. The following night, I woke up to a strange sensation. I stirred, not fully awake, as something cold and wet brushed against my hand. My first instinct was to think it was Max. Maybe he had come inside after all. He always liked to sleep by my side. I whispered, my voice barely above a breath, "Good boy, Mac." But I didn't get the comforting sound of a dog's breathing or his usual weight on the bed. Oh, it was silent. The wetness on my hand lingered, but there was no shift in the bed. It didn't make sense. Hadn't Max been outside? Still half asleep, I pushed the thought away and drifted back into slumber. The chilling discovery. I woke up the next morning, feeling disoriented and strange, but I quickly pushed those feelings aside. There were other, more pressing concerns. The first one being Max. He wasn't in the room. He wasn't in the house. I called his name over and over, the panic rising in my chest. "Max. Max, where are you?" I searched the house, starting in the living room, then moving to the kitchen, calling and calling. But there was no answer. Not even a bark. I ran to the back door and flung it open, expecting to find him lounging outside, maybe after a long walk. But the backyard was empty. Completely empty. The air was still, the only sound the rustling of the trees in the wind. I stood there for a long time, calling his name again and again, but it was like he had disappeared into thin air. Tears welled up in my eyes as the reality of it hit me. He's gone. I ran back inside, my heart heavy with grief. I couldn't understand why. Maybe he had run away, scared by whatever had been happening in the house. Maybe he just had enough. I had to believe that. I sat on the couch, crying quietly, trying to convince myself that Max would come back. He had to. He always came back. Right? But that thought offered me little comfort. Later that night, I decided I needed to do something, anything to distract myself. It was the only way to cope with the pit in my stomach. I ran a hot shower, letting the steam fill the bathroom, hoping it would calm me. I stood in front of the mirror washing my face when I noticed the condensation on the glass. The steam had fogged up the mirror, but as I reached for a towel to wipe it clean, something stopped me. Something in the mist had caught my eye. There, smeared across the foggy mirror, was a message. I blinked, not believing my eyes. Humans can lick too. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I felt the blood drain from my face. The letters were written in red, and they looked fresh, as though they had just been etched into the mist. A slow, crawling terror spread through my body. I took a step back, my hand instinctively flying to my mouth. I looked at the message again, hoping it was just a trick of the light. Maybe it was just a smear from the shower. But no. It was clear as day. Humans can lick too. I turned around, my breath caught in my throat. My heart pounded so hard in my chest that it felt like it might explode. The bathroom door creaked open behind me and I spun around, but no one was there. I was alone. But I wasn't alone. The truth hit me like a truck. The message on the mirror. Was it some sick joke? Some twisted prank? Or was it something worse? My body turned cold as I realized the horrifying truth. Max never ran away. The scratching sounds at night weren't from the house settling. The feeling of something licking my hand in the middle of the night wasn't Max either. It was something or someone else. I stumbled backward, my legs failing me as I tried to make sense of it all. My head was spinning, my body shaking uncontrollably. And then the bathroom door creaked again. I didn't look. I couldn't. The bathroom was empty, but the message on the mirror remained. And I knew deep down that I had made a terrible mistake. Max hadn't left. Something else had taken him. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind me and the lights flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. A low growl echoed from the shadows. And I knew whatever had been with me all this time, it wasn't done yet.